What we're going to do in this video is that I'm going out to select Photoshop manipulation tutorials that I think are easy enough for a newbie to complete. The goal here is not to actually do the tutorial, but to kind of showcase the tutorial, give an illustration of what I did when I went through it, and show you my approach to it, and explain a few things that may not have been explained in the original tutorial. But the goal is that you will kind of watch this, go and do the tutorial with a little more knowledge of what it's going to take to get that tutorial done and get the results that you want. So let's take a look here. Now, I cannot pronounce this individual's name, so I'm sorry. I'm not even going to attempt to mangle it, but I will put the link to the actual YouTube page and the link to the video that this came from. Starting off, this is with the original image, and this is a screenshot of it. It doesn't do it justice, so forgive me, but it is a great looking image that he created. And what I like about this is that there were only 4 original images to work with. This is one of the things that I look for when I first started doing Photoshop manipulations. And I do them as a hobby. I'm not a digital artist. I'm not attempting to be a digital artist, but I love doing photo manipulations, and I love going out and doing all of these tutorials. I look for ones that don't have a lot of assets. So when you get those that have 20, 15, 20 assets, even 10, sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming to go through it all, to mask everything, especially for a newbie. Now, if you have a couple of days that you want to dedicate to doing a complicated tutorial, by all means do it. But when you're first learning, the tutorials that have minimal assets are the best ones, because it allows you to focus on technique versus all of the complicated things that come with trying to blend all of those images together. Okay, so let's look at where I started. And what I do is I watch the video first. I don't watch the video then go back and watch the video and I don't do that. I just simply watch the video, kind of get an idea. And then if I run into issues, I may go look at a specific part, but I kind of got an idea of what he did. So let's start here. I'm going to delete this. Okay. All right. The first thing, let me pull up this image here so we can kind of. All right. All right. So this is the mask that I created, but this was the very first image that he had. Okay, and we'll start off with, he started off here with this one. Okay, and we placed it here, and what I did was I took a guide where I wanted the horizon to be, so I put that there. So this is my horizon, and everything is based on my horizon being here. Okay, so we did a mask to remove the sky, put the levels on, and you can see we just made slight adjustments, some slight adjustments to the levels. Then we added the path. And if we go to the original path, this is the original path. And you just take a pen tool. But if you're starting off, maybe you don't do the pen tool. Maybe you just take your quick selection tool and select everything. Come over, select that, and maybe get down here. All right, and if you hold the Alt key, you can subtract from the selection. So you hold down the Alt key, subtract from the selection. And now when you come in here, what you can do is, to make this easy, if you're not really good with the pen tool, just You're going to use your polygonal tool, your lasso tool here. And since we want to subtract, we're going to hit here. And we're just going to draw around this area. Double click when you have everything to subtract. Okay, and you can do it here. Same thing here. Now you can see it's a curve. This doesn't lend itself to a curve, but you can go right on the inside, get close enough, and subtract. So if you're not good with the pen tool, this is a really great option to get started. So we want to add this in. So we'll go to Add. And we'll just draw around the area where we want to add. When you're done, just double click. All right. Once that is done, you just hit your mask, or you can go up here and select the mask. You bring it up and you can see the mask, and we won't get into this screen here, but if you hit OK, click here, and now there's your mask. Okay. All right. So that's an easy way of doing it. I'm just going to go out here and close it. And that's pretty much what I did here. I just put a mask in, and then I took my brush and brushed a little bit more to bring in the background a little bit. Okay. So those were the first two layers, and you can see I'm trying to get everything below the horizon here. All right. Next, we put in a solid layer. Okay. So this is solid color layer. Let me show you the color. This was the color that he selected, so I used that same color. And this layer here we set to the blend mode of multiply. And multiply will just darken, basically darkens, takes in the colors and darkens the layer. So any color underneath it takes into that color and then it darkens it. So that's where we get that from. And then it's a matter of, we have our model, and this is the model. So let me turn off these layers. So this was the original. Did a mask, and the only thing I did with this for this, I just went to, again, I went to quick select, select subject, and it got most of it, but if we zoom in, you can see that it missed some areas. And again, we can use our quick selection tool and we can just kind of brush across here like this. But then you can go to your lasso tool or your polygonal lasso tool, and we want to add that in. Double click when we have everything. And again, you can kind of work it like that, especially for areas like this. We want to kind of add all of this in. Now it's better to be on the inside of your selection than to be on the outside of it. Double click, and you can see we got that. So, and by that I mean, here's the grass and here's the subject. So I'm going to just go in on the inside, just on the inside of it. And that ensures that you get a better selection than if you were try to really get right to the edge. I'm holding down the space bar so I can move it around here. And I just do this. And I got lost here. So yeah, let's make our way back over. Double click. And you can see we're just adding it in. So eventually what will happen if you spend enough time doing this, you'll get used to the pen tool and you'll do the same thing with the pen tool. But that's what I did there. And so then we created this mask. Right. And then finally we put the background in. And between all of the masking, so if we take this background had a mask on it, you can see it has the mask on it. So we did that. We stretched it as well, so it's been stretched out. The original image, in fact, let's go ahead and pull up this original image so you can. Let's just ignore that. All right. All right. All right. So this is everything that we did. And now it's a matter of color grading. So let's start with the path. And what he did was he took a curves adjustment layer, and this is just for the lights and the shadows. Okay, so the light is coming from this direction, and he chose that because this is where the light is. So the light is coming from this direction. So the light is coming from this direction. So we put I'm going to turn the mask off so we can see it. So you can see we darken everything, and then we just took a gradient. And in fact, let me just show you what he did. Well, he'll show you, but all right, turn that off, and I'm going to delete that and put a mask on. So we just took a gradient, made sure that it's black here, 100%, white here, 0%, and you can change the opacity down to, what happens with the opacity is that you want to build up the layers. So if I'm at 100%, you can see it's fully black, and if I do this, works out okay. But if I change the opacity to 50%, now it's going to take two approaches to do that. It's almost like changing the flow on the brush, where you build up slower what you want. So if we just look here, you can see the difference. Okay. All right. So I'm going to delete that. So that's what we have here. The brightness contrast, it's really just to darken it a little bit more. And then the hue and saturation, essentially the hue and saturation is that we need to get the color of the landscape onto the path. And that's what we use the hue and saturation for. So you can see that we colorize, because colorize adds the color to it. So we can see that. All right. So we go here. We got our brightness, and there was a desaturation. Lightness was changed, and we colorized so we can add the color to it. And then you have your 38 hue getting into that orange. You can see we're getting into that orange, blues, greens, and we get into that orange, and I think it was like 38. And 13 is just to desaturate it, so how bright it is. Okay. All right. All right. So there is the pathway. And then it was a matter of hue saturation. Now we didn't colorize this, but what you did was is that you trying to desaturate. Really, here it's just trying to desaturate the subject because you can see these colors are really bright, and the tone of this is kind of muted. But so you desaturate it. Use a color balance to get, and really what it is add a little more yellow, as you can see here, and then take out the red. And the red is really about, taking out the skin. The skin is usually red, so it's about getting those colors a little muted. All right. And then we add another curves. Now, of course, he did the same thing. He used a gradient tool. He used a gradient tool to do hairs. I just took a brush and I brushed on the highlights. So here are there everything is shadow. Add in the highlights. Okay. And this is kind of where it's at. Now from this point on, I kind of threw my own little take on it. So I tend to do this with all of my photo manipulations. And so I can show you what I did. Control Alt E creates a stamp of all of the layers. So you come here, you highlight everything, and you can Control Shift Alt E, and it creates a stamp. And then I take that stamp and I turn it into a smart object. And then I add a camera raw. Okay, so let's take this. Okay, and I'll show you what I did with the camera raw. Oh, we got one thing we have to do. My bad. Skip the step here. The shadow. Okay, so we have her with the shadow. Created the shadow. Now to create a shadow, you'll see in the tutorial, you just create a duplicate of the subject. Control J. I apply the layer mask, and then I'm going to get my eyedrop tool, and I'm going to pick a really dark area in the grass. That's the brown. And then control click to select to create a selection of the subject, and Alt backspace to fill. All right, Control D to deselect, and then Control T to go to transform. And what I do is I go transform and I distort, and then I just bring the layer down and do that. Okay, now what he did, and you'll see here, he put in a field blur, a tilt blur. So if we go to filter, blur gallery, and tilt shift, I kind of like this technique. I've never used this technique before, but if you take your tool, you can kind of grab it. And to rotate, you just come out here over the top of it and rotate. And the way this works is that the further you get away, the more the blurring is. So if I take this blur and we're going to take it up to 99. Okay. Now I can come here and I can move this, but you can see the blur, the way this works is that there's no blurring here, and the blur that's going up to 99 happens between here and here. Okay, so that's the gradient. It's just saying this is 0, this is 99, right? And everything here is 0. So the blur doesn't take place until it gets here. And that's what he did here, is that he took it, and essentially it is that the closer to the subject, the darker the shadow. The further away from the subject, the lighter the shadow, and the more it's blurred out. And that's the concept here. So I used that, and then he did another Gaussian blur to blur it out a little bit more. Now, I tend to make my shadows multiply and then lower the opacity. You'll see that he did it a little bit different, but that's how I do mine. All right. So now that we have the shadow in, we can now create our stamp. We go to our camera raw. And really don't do anything with these, but I took the texture down just to give it a more of a kind of a painted feel. If you lower the texture, it starts to smooth everything out, so you can see it starts to look like a painting. But I just did -8, -10, somewhere around there. With detail, I always do 50 on the sharpening, 25 on noise reduction. So I've been doing that so long, it's just a habit that I do it with all of these photo manipulations. Okay, and that's pretty much it. Now there's color grading, but I don't tend to color grade here. What I do is I use a color lookup table. Okay, so now that I have that, here's my first color lookup table. And what I used was the 35 trip. And I lowered the opacity because at 100% is this. And I thought that's just too much. Let's take it down to 50. Okay. Then I add another color lookup table. And this time I use the cinematic. This is one I got from Envato Elements. So if you have Envato Elements, you can use that. But I use this one. And again, I took the opacity all the way down to 35% because, again, at 100%, I like it. It just seemed a little bit too much. But maybe if I take it to 75. I kind of dig that. Maybe I'll leave it here. But this is what I tend to do with my color grading to bring everything together. I'll go to a color lookup table to kind of finish it off a little bit. And that's pretty much it. This is the tutorial. So color lookup table, go find some LUTs. And remember, you don't have to have the full opacity, but that final layer of the clone stamp tool, so you can do your camera raw and then add in some color LUTs on top of it. This is how I finish off all of my photo manipulations. And it allows me to be a little different from the original artist, put my own flair on it, my own take on it. So you can do something like that. Okay. All right. So that is it. When we're done, you're going to see, I'm going to turn this into a thumbnail. So it's going to go boom, and that will be it. All right. So I'm out. We will be doing several more of these and see how they go. See how people like them.